Good morning, everyone. My name's Tim Bobak. I'm the development director for UK, Middle East, and Africa. And so I've been working closely with the teams at NGN, the broader organization, to frame some of our research about what's happening in the threat landscape in the Middle East, with a specific focus on the financial sector. At a high level, we see lots of different cybercrime that takes place on an international level on a daily basis. But what's interesting is to take it down to a country level and start looking at it as a microcosm of the kind of risks that people are facing. And one of the more effective ways of doing this is to look at very basic types of cybercrime, which generally go around, for example, credit card fraud or account takeovers or other kinds of PII, for example, or leaked data sale, which are often the first signs of interest in a region from a cybercrime perspective. In this particular investigation and also presentation that we're going to be going through today, I'm going to be talking about a wide spectrum of cybercrime types. So not just card fraud, which I'm showing on the screen now, but in addition to that, issues like, for example, the different kinds of attacks that are happening across the Middle East. Obviously, we'll be touching on ransomware. We'll be talking about some financial services specific attacks that we've seen in the past in the region and also globally. And finally, we'll be talking a little bit about nation state APT and the types of espionage and sabotage that are happening across the Middle East region. So without further ado, I'll jump in because I know that we've got a bit of pressure for time. We're trying to cram in as much content for you guys this morning. And what we did in the last reporting period, to dive in here, is we started to look at, well, actually, what are the metrics for cybercrime in Bahrain currently? Where do we start from when we're going out and deciding to make a presentation? Well, how can we kind of get an understanding about what's going on? Well, the first thing we do is we start looking at the raw data types. And what we did was we went out and examined all of the different dark web stores that were selling different kinds of credit cards for fraud. Now, generally speaking, on sale, currently in the global threat landscape, there are two types of credit cards that cyber criminals buy on the deep and the dark web. They buy them from stores, or they buy them from Telegram chats, or they buy them from even open websites. And we collect information about those cards being posted for sale, and then obviously we then categorize that and look into it in more detail. So in the period from the 1st of October through till yesterday, we're able to identify there are about 2,500 and 2,200 respectively compromised cards. Now, the compromised credit cards in the top line, which is the 2,352, were being that's basically all the data that's on a card, but it's not any of the track 1 or track 2, i.e. the chip and pin data. So that might be, for example, information about the CVV code, expiration dates, full card number, maybe some supporting information about the actual owner, their address, etc. I'll show you some examples in a minute. And we saw that these cards are being sold on average for about $18.50. And extrapolating from that, we're able to identify the probable losses faced by the banking sector, which would have been around 1.2 million US dollars. In this calculation, we haven't factored for really any of the additional losses that go around this kind of fraud and these kind of attacks. And that could be, for example, loss of customer confidence. It could be money leaving the economy itself. It could be users leaving the bank. It could be additional impacts and run-on effects onto their businesses. So this is obviously just the losses that we see. And in order to sort of calculate some of those losses, we also looked at some of the advertisements that cyber criminals were putting up. And some of the figures that they were posting around the cards for Bahrain were significantly higher, as we'll touch on in the next slide. In addition to that, threat actors are also selling cards for cloning, along with PIN data where it's available. Or if they don't have PIN data, they'll also just sell the card that can be used in swipe-based transactions. And again, the losses on these kind of cards are significant. there's a higher element of risk and more effort that goes into doing this kind of card fraud, because you need to make a physical card, which is why even though you make more money as a criminal stealing using this methodology, you're going to end up with a higher theft amount, which is why the losses per card here on this particular slide is generally higher. And this type of fraud is obviously, because it's going to have a physical element, it's able to impact more, and it'll normally look like, for example, a shopping spree or a series of transactions that have happened using a physical card, but either in a new region or in a series of shops that the end user normally doesn't use. So we're seeing these kind of changes to the threat landscape. And I look back a little bit further in our data, and it does look as though this kind of growth of cybercrime has been relatively steady across the GCC, but also that extends to Bahrain. At the moment, I was thinking about this in the global perspective, because these aren't enormous numbers yet. But one of the important things to bear in mind is that once cyber criminals begin to target an area, and they then see that is effective, they then become more and more active, and the per capita losses and the per capita targeting becomes significantly higher. And unfortunately, that looks as though what's happening in Bahrain. So although in terms of the total losses that are happening through credit card fraud that's tracked on the deep in the dark web, Bahrain is quite a small percent. But then if you compare that to the global population, and then compare it on a per capita basis, say to the United Kingdom, or to Europe or to the United States, the figures are coming up to being almost equal, which can be a bit of a concern, because we do see that across other countries in the GCC, obviously Saudi, the UAE, there's been massive increases in fraud, and they are more targeted per capita than Bahrain currently. But that's a trend that will be expected to continue. So there is a large amount of attacks happening, and on a per capita basis, the Middle East is disproportionately targeted. So I think that's the strategic takeaway to take from this slide. So obviously you can look into the figures. You can say, oh, that's a lot of money. You can say that isn't a lot of money. I think the amounts of money currently are immaterial. The point of this presentation is to say that the threat landscape is currently changing, and the Middle East is being increasingly targeted for cybercrime. And this can happen in ebbs and flows. You can see, though, that, for example, cards are being posted almost on a daily basis. You might have some of these red lines, which represent large increases in the amount of cards being put up, which could be, a series of ATM skimmers that have then been put onto the market, or it could be that there's a series of, for example, breaches that then lead to credit card data being stolen and put up on the dark web. We've obviously taken from October of 2020 forward. As you can see, there have been some big breaches in the past. But if we run the data back to 2019, there was almost nothing. So I think the conclusion is that, and we've seen this across the GCC, that if you average it all out, it's an increasing wave, unfortunately, of different types of cybercrime, whether it's for card not present based fraud, whether it's for track 1 and track 2 cloned cards, the attacks are increasing. And an example of this, and where, for example, we tried to support some of our data around our findings, we're just looking for relatively recent posts. So I pulled one up from yesterday by a threat actor called Dr. Zeller. You can actually search for him if you have a Telegram application. Search for Dr. and then Zeller. You can do it on your screen now, and you'll see a number of accounts come up in the Telegram chat. And this particular cyber criminal posts his stolen credit cards up for sale in this account and takes money, and obviously then is conducting fraud. And one of the credit card numbers that he was then selling, or credit cards he was selling, was one with a $1,806 balance that was obviously located in Bahrain. So I think it's illustrative that this is happening at scale, but it's useful for you guys to be able to put, sink your teeth into that. There's obviously large amounts of cards that are being put up. They're put up with the also for, I guess, general education purposes, this is a screenshot from a large underground store called bingo.hi. And the cards are put up on here on sale. In the left-hand side, you can see the credit card numbers. You can see the expiration dates that have been applied. You can see the type of credit card. You can see the bank affected. The bank affected is identified using open bin number information, so like public bin data. It's broadly available. So you can have the first 6 digits, and then they obviously don't post the full card number. They remove, the criminals remove some of the content and use that in order to obfuscate their activity. And then additional information like parts of the addresses, the cities, the countries obviously then provided, and you can see the information about the victim, so like the telephone, which is this line of ticks, or the email, which is this line here as well, and also the validity ratio, which is this percentage marker here. You can see the level of organization that cyber criminals are now going into, and the amount of data that they have in order to support their frauds. They know exactly which financial institutions they're targeting, and they are, I would say, in a strong position when it comes to fraud. And this is why we have to be increasingly aware and raising, what I would say, knowledge, providing information about this kind of attack, because these kinds of attacks, because it feeds into the different and other kinds of cybercrime that can happen. And that could be the theft of personal data. That could be increasing in skill level of different cyber criminals. So they might move from doing credit card fraud to then doing attacks like ransomware. And obviously we can see other, for example, cards here that relate to Bahrain. But I do want to pivot here and talk a little bit more broadly. I'm aware that we've got a limited amount of time today. But at the same time, it's not all about fraud in the cyberspace. And I talked briefly about ransomware. Just to finish off on the card fraud front, though, I think it's indicative that everything across the board is increasing now. So it could be credit card fraud, it could be leaks, it could be breaches. And I think one of the things that is really worth putting out there, and it's talking about volumes, there's 40,000 credit cards, for example, that are being put up over the course of 6 months. Oh, no, not 40,000, sorry. $40,000 in cybercrime revenue of cards, and around, I believe, 5,000 cards total that are being put up on these underground forums. There's multiple instances of attacks. And, we're also seeing that effectively Bahrain is being targeted as well across other attack types. They just might not be as visible. Whether that's because, for example, ransomware attacks are hidden frequently by organizations. No one wants to know that, their customers to know that they've been hacked. It could be that PII is now also being stolen. There are many, many kinds of attacks. I think the credit card data shows the frequency and the financial impact of this very easily. But there are other Bahrain-specific attacks. So one of the ones that we identified and investigated was by a threat actor called Scarface, who is avatars on the screen, is actually on raid forums. I've obfuscated the name of the organization that was affected, but I think the key point is that this particular threat actor was choosing to target Bahrain. He was identifying that there's a market for data about Bahrain, so people want to buy it. There's money out there for it. Now, we actually investigated and talked to this specific threat actor who was posting on an underground forum called Red Forums. We just talked to him from messengers. From that, we're able to establish that the posts that he was putting up about the attack in Bahrain were actually not true. I.e., he'd said he'd got all of the emails and backup data. He'd actually just taken these email addresses off of the open internet, and then he had a password related to them. But I think the key point here, much like the card fraud, is about illustrating the trend. Late January or early Feb, and at the particular I was surprised to see that Bahrain was being targeted and that people were interested in having this data. And I think that's the fundamental change, and that's that the fact is, if we go up to macro level and we look across not just happening in Bahrain, but also happening across the whole large amount of There have been threat actors like Drumlu who've been heavily targeting Saudi Arabia, the UAE. He's not yet targeted Bahrain, to our knowledge, but we're seeing individual cybercriminal threat actors now heavily targeting the Middle East, and whether that's because of, I would say, maybe it's geopolitical reasons, maybe it's just because there's more money. And I think the market size has basically just grown to the sense where people now see that they can make good money out of targeting the Middle East, as we saw with the Great Credit Card. And accordingly, now operationalizing their capabilities and targeting different organizations. And it could be anything. It could be, we've got some screenshots here, health insurance providers. I mean, we've seen everyone from, and this is primarily just for access sale or data theft. We're not even talking about ransomware operators just yet. We're talking about people who are stealing data or collecting, for example, university, data sets, people's names, their passport numbers, their telephones, for use in these kind of fraud attacks. This is now happening increasingly often, and there's a market for it. People are making hundreds, if not thousands of dollars off of each individual attack. And so we're seeing the actors who are performing these kind of incidents. They might be Russian speaking in origin, so from Ukraine or from Belarus, from Russia or Kazakhstan. But we're also seeing a new level of attacks as well, and that's that increasingly there's a wave of Turkish cyber criminals who are also, and North African cyber criminals who are also targeting the GCC. And this isn't something that we necessarily foretold, but it's certainly become clear that the cybercrime ecosystem has really developed a market of its own in order to target the Middle East. So unfortunately, this will then, this targeting of, Oman or let's say Qatar or Saudi Arabia or the UAE, obviously this will eventually have an impact and start overflowing into affecting the cybersecurity of Bahraini organizations because of the increased volume of attacks and the fact that there is now, I would say, a mature market for different types of data, different types of ancillary information on individual victims, on companies, on data, on credit card information focused around the Middle East. So we have a threat actor that we chose to focus on, who's targeting a large amount of Arabic-speaking countries. He's interesting because he shows the kind of development of what kind of targeting happens across the Middle East. And he started very early on in May of 2020, and he was just selling actually just an exploit, and he was trying to get money for selling this exploit. And one of the things that he realized is he put this exploit up for sale, as you can see here, but actually he then was asked, well, actually, we don't necessarily want your exploit, but can you sell us all of the data that's related to it? And then this then led to him targeting multiple different organizations everywhere from Egypt all the way through to KSA, and conducting, I think, between 20 to 40 different breaches that he publicly disclosed and provided data upon. We're able to then focus in on this individual actor using some of our intelligence capabilities. We're able to link his activity to an open web profile and then pass that information over to law enforcement agencies. So he seems to be less active now. I don't know whether that's a factor of his attacks or whether that's a factor of him being arrested by law enforcement. But I think one thing that we've neglected to touch on so far, and I'm aware that we are, coming up to a relatively hard stop in a few minutes, is that we've also neglected to touch on APTs and advanced threat actors. So one of the key areas that we've touched on is the growth of cybercrime. I think this is one of the things that I'm very keen to get across on this particular presentation today, is that cybercrime is now a very real issue. Whether it's from card fraud, whether it's from PII theft. Obviously, we can talk about ransomware, but there are other attacks that are very much relevant to the financial sector. Bahrain being a country with a very developed financial sector, it's worth thinking about not just these cybercrime elements, or for example APTs for nation state and espionage style attacks, but also what are the additional threats? What are the more exotic threats that are happening to the financial sector? So firstly, it's worth noting that you do have large amounts of ransomware. I'll just touch on this slide first. I mean, there were multiple different ransomware incidents that we're seeing across the Middle East that we're responding to, many of them in the financial sector. We performed an incident response, in fact, in Egypt recently, where it took 3 hours. Once the network had been breached, it took 3 hours for them to entirely crypto lock a very large financial institution. Now, that's immediately extends and thinking, well, okay, crypto locking ransomware is going to take place. And you guys will have been seeing that. There have been incidents of ransomware and crypto locking inside of Bahrain that you, in the local community in information security, will all be aware of. But there's also other kinds of attacks that can happen. Ransomware is very simple. It's a very big problem. It's something that everyone should be focused on. But there are other risks that we do face. Obviously, we've touched on PII, we've touched on card data. Additionally, for financials, it's worth noting that many of the systems that you guys carry for financial services processing are also at target. So it could be your SWIFT systems, maybe, for example, the switching system for card transactions might be vulnerable. You may have the risk of threat actors gaining access to card processing and issuing, for example, credit cards in their names, or taking mule credit cards, increasing the limits on those and using those for cash outs. You can have logical attacks on the ATM systems. So that's jackpotting the ATMs with ATM malware through the ATM controller systems inside the bank. Or you can just have people abusing core banking platforms in order to increase or decrease account balances for then further theft or perform transfers. So we see quite a rich financial APT landscape. Groups like MoneyTaker, Silence, Cobalt, obviously nation states even, such as the North Koreans with Lazarus, have been targeting heavily the financial sector. And I think it's worth noting that with the increase in the value of Bitcoin, for any of you, if you are involved in any exchanges that might be based in Bahrain, obviously Bitcoin exchanges are heavily targeted at the moment because they hold large amounts of cryptocurrency, which is obviously very valuable right now. So the increased sort of more and more interesting, more complex attacks against financial institutions through these, I would say, non-standard theft methods. Most people expect, for example, that when they're going to be hacked, it's going to be a ransomware incident. Actually, there are many kinds of other infrastructure that can be targeted during a financial information security incident, and accordingly, I just wanted to draw a couple of those to your attention. And obviously, a number of these threats, like MoneyTaker or Silence, etc., or all of these reports, in fact, are available via our website. If you want to go into more detail, look at the TTPs, so the tactic, techniques, and procedures used by the groups, or if you want to receive accurate MITRE mapping onto the attack framework, you'll be able to find that information there too. I think a final point, as I'm aware that we're quite pressed for time, is that there's obviously a continued threat of nation-state level APTs. So financial institutions, government institutions, private companies, obviously at risk from not just the threats that we've outlined, whether it's PII, theft, ransomware, card fraud, so on and so forth. Espionage remains a very large threat. I think everyone's aware that the geopolitical landscape in the Middle East is complex, and there's I would say a disproportionately large amount of targeting and active threat groups in the Middle East currently relative to anywhere else in the world. We obviously at Group IB work globally, and we look at the threat landscape, for example, for it could be a country like Australia, and we'd be performing incident response, or it could be somewhere in South America like Colombia. And there are very, very few places where the amount of state versus state espionage campaigns are as high, as frequent, or as targeted. And you can see groups like I mentioned here a number of Iranian groups, but obviously there are various different threat actor groups from various different countries across the GCC and also outside of the GCC. So, Chinese, Russian, United States, the UK, where I'm sitting, all of these countries and institutions are performing espionage. They say that they have cyber armies, they're conducting incidents, and they're using tools. Now, obviously, they're focusing on areas of interest to them, which frequently lie in geopolitically active areas such as the Middle East. And that then drives hacking, that drives espionage, and in some cases, as I'm sure you're all aware, it does also drive sabotage. So we've seen, for example, in the financial sector, after data has been stolen, threat actors trying to obfuscate or hide the fact that they've been active in networks, and then using crypto locking tools in order to hide the fact that they've stolen data. Much like the NotPetya attacks that took place in Ukraine. Similarly, we saw the attacks like that happen in Southeast Asia by Chinese nation-state APTs. And obviously we have, the big example, which is the usage of crypto locking tools for sabotage, as was conducted by Iran relatively early on in the cycle of cybersecurity development, with, I recall, Flame being used. So this is really the unfortunate state of affairs. I think the takeaways are just that the problem is unfortunately continuing and increasing in severity. It's now become an arms race where obviously people are beginning to invest seriously in cybersecurity, in, for example, security operations centers, outsourcing some of those functions, getting the headcount, getting the budgets that they need. But it's certainly a game of cat and mouse, where we'll be chasing and working with our partners in order to make sure that they're well defended, so that these threats then migrate to other easier targets, which is ultimately our goal, is to make sure that you're protected and make sure that your assets and infrastructure, as well as your customers and your employees, are well protected in quite a difficult period, I think, in the last year with the COVID risk continuing to grow. So on that juncture, I don't want to overrun too much, as I believe I'm now getting a couple of messages from our lovely organizers saying, Tim, unfortunately, it's about time that you finish up. So I'll go on to the last slide, and I'll also open up the floor and see if there are any questions that we can take from the audience. So thank you very much.
Hi, hello. Great. Thank you, Tim, for your presentation. And first of all, I would like to welcome everyone to joining our first NGN Majlis event. I hope it is the start of the good tradition, then where we can share our thoughts and the recent practices that we have in Bahrain. So my name is Ilya Leonov. I'm handling the security practice direction in NGN International. And today I would like to discuss with you, so if we have time, to discuss with you the evolution of the security roles in cybersecurity. Okay, so the evolution of cybersecurity roles and responsibilities. As you know, we are now living in the new paradigm, a new reality, and we are facing a lot of new challenges. First of all, during this pandemic situation and a lot of changes across the organization processes and environment, we see the transition from the traditional perimeter security, where we are keeping the business assets in the safe place, to the zero trust. I'm sure that you are aware of this approach, but for whom who do not know, the zero trust means that we need to protect our users, to protect our data and assets, regardless of the location of this particular data or user. So as we can see, that this lead to the more complex and sophisticated attacks, because users are, let's say, distributed, the environment are distributed, so it leads to the complex and sophisticated attacks. Here we can define like two groups, and Tim already mentioned some of them in his presentation. First of all, definitely we see a huge spike in the common attacks, like different ways of phishing, wishing or smishing, data leakage, and new malware. So this is what we can see nowadays with what the users are faced of. And definitely the complex attacks, like again, as Tim mentioned, the ransomware, he highlighted some of the cases in Bahrain, but I'm sure that you are also aware about the latest case with the Acer Corporation, where the ransomware group asked them for the 50 millions of US dollars to, to decrypt the data, and some additional, sophisticated targeted attacks like SolarWinds case. I'm sure that everyone is aware, and it was the huge hype on the last year about this particular attack on SolarWinds. So what is the idea on all of this situation that we have now? That it is create a huge load on the IT operations, on the security operations, because IT teams now, they are worried about the user protection, about migration some production services to the cloud or to the let's say disaster recovery sites. So all of these factors create like a huge load on the IT and security teams. Definitely, in that case, this information security becomes like a more heavier in terms of the business operations. So they, let's say, involved in the two different areas, as we can see again. So definitely it is the risk and compliance. The CISO nowadays, they are worried about the local regulations, industry standards. They need to, let's say, develop a new policies and procedures to, let's say, be more aligned with the nowadays business requirements and needs. But also what we see from today's situation, it's the huge increase of the practical security, that the companies, they are worried about the monitoring and response of security threats, because as I told previously, the environment is distributed, and the users, they are located in the different, let's say, areas, and they're working from the different environment. So we need to somehow monitor and properly respond on potential threats. Also, we see, some new roles like threat hunters, forensic investigations, even some big organizations, they are like create specific roles in the information security departments for the threat hunters and forensic investigations to, be more specific, because you need to like have a dedicated resource to do the threat hunting and find some vulnerabilities and hidden malware in your infrastructure or on the user side, on the endpoints. And obviously the security DevOps, as we can see, during this migration processes and again, the distributed environment, we need to make sure that from the security point of view, all the production systems, they are well integrated, and everything is working properly and not affected on the business processes. So I will not take a lot of your time, so I would like to, let's say, keep some time for the discussion. I just want to conclude that this transformation journey in cybersecurity, definitely it will continue, and the connection between business requirements and IT operations, security operations, this connection will be closer, and I'm sure that in the in the coming years, we will see some new roles, some new areas in cybersecurity. So yeah, I think we will see some new, let's say, directions in this field. So thank you, everyone. I will pass the word to Mr. Hassan from KFH.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to present to you today, and I really appreciate this opportunity from NGN, and this is a great initiative from NGN as a company, keeping in mind the increasing number of attacks and the global threat vector around us. So for companies specialized in information security, it's a great initiative to introduce the new threats, the recent attacks, the recent information to everyone around them, not only customers, also for peers, attendees from the country. So this will help everyone increase his awareness level, and of course, this will be a good, great potential for future business as well. So now, speaking as a customer of NGN services, I have been with them since a year now, and I have been using their services. I really appreciate their approach dealing with information security and the recent cybersecurity attacks and threats around us. And this is a great opportunity also for Bahrain to understand what's happening globally. So I haven't prepared a specialized presentation. It's not like a training exercise here, but I have a few ideas or concepts that I would like to discuss here. One, like we have some hot spots or some hot topics that are worth mentioning. Keeping in mind everything that's been said by Ilya and the team here in NGN, we have seen that we have many recent attacks happening, ransomware attacks, zero-day attacks, vulnerability-related attacks, the recent SolarWind incident. Also, we have the recent Microsoft incident that happened last month, I think, related to Microsoft Exchange. So this is an endless loop. For us, an information security field, it's really difficult and tough and challenging to keep up with all of this. Now, speaking as an expert working in information security for more than 10 years now, and coming back from an IT background, and now I know both worlds. Speaking from IT, I know the challenges those people face to keep the systems up to date and to upgrade within the budget allocated to them. Also, from information security perspective, I know the challenges from compliance, regulatory, and data governance perspective, which is really difficult at some times. Now, looking at the increasing rate of business transformation and the nature of business in general. Now, if you look at 2020 and the COVID-19 situation, companies were forced to increase their complexity level. They are forced to do a lot of business transformation. They are doing a lot of digital initiative now. All of these doesn't come without any risks, doesn't come without any threats to the organizations. So keeping in mind the new rules, the new laws coming around us from GDPR to PDPL in Bahrain, we have to consider all the data protection related aspects as well. So with these points on the screen, increased organizational complexity, data protection, business transformation, regulatory complexity and changes, volatility, and recent global attacks, we have few hot spots or areas to look at from information security perspective, from risk management perspective, also from business management perspective. We need to prepare ourselves for the new projections. We need to have a plan. We need to have a clear strategic initiative toward 2021 and for the coming 5 years at least. This is the short-term goal. We need to upgrade our security and risk perspective. We need to rethink how we look at information security and cybersecurity threats, not only from IT perspective, not only from attacking perspective, also from business ease perspective, and in a way to help and facilitate or provide the right layers for business to perform their digital initiatives and digital transformation successfully. Now, from risk perspective, we are aware of the fact that we have many zero-day attacks and vulnerabilities coming every month. Every month we're seeing a new vulnerability. Almost half to 1% of the attacks are coming from zero-day attacks, zero-day vulnerabilities that nobody knows about, no vulnerability tool can detect, and no information security consultant or firm can tell you about it. Even the major vendor like Microsoft, Google, SolarWinds got attacked. Nobody knows what happened. Nobody knew about the vulnerability. It was there for months. It was detected and discovered late, unfortunately. And what was the consequences? Major loss, major breach. Looking at the field, Ilya also mentioned the same point. The recent increased number of attacks on Bahrain and the region itself. The whole region is experiencing an increasing number of attacks coming towards the financial sector, towards people using financial services. Phishing attacks, we have smishing attacks, we have vishing attacks, we have many other ransomware attacks, distributed denial of service attacks coming towards organizations. The amount of the investment required to fight all of this is huge. CISOs, information security experts, are suffering. They are now under huge pressure from their business, from their companies, and also from the global, the increasing number of global attacks. They need to keep up with all of this. At the same time, they need to maintain compliance with regulatory and laws. So I believe most of the CISOs in the field are facing the same challenges. We need to rethink our approach. We need to rethink our talent in information security. The unemployment rate of IT security professionals is almost zero, and this is statistics coming from Gartner, from other sources. So the requirement for an expert information security employees is increasing. And I do suggest personally that the new generation, the millennials, should focus on this field. We don't have much people in information security, especially women. For ladies, they need to focus on this field as well. Ladies in information security is a welcome added value. We need to understand the numbers around us. Statistics say 40% rise in critical infrastructure and security projects. So this is happening. This is not a plan. It is already happening. Companies are investing a lot in information security. This will require many new expertise in the field. We can't always rely on consultants or companies. It's not always feasible for small businesses, medium-sized businesses. 45% of cloud misconfiguration or mistakes, it's happening due to human error. So these numbers do matter, actually. So we need proper training. We need proper support from organizations around us. And I believe companies like NGN can really help. They can add value in the market. They have training centers. They have managed security services. I believe more companies should have similar initiatives. From the government side, I believe also we need some support, more support to come from the government toward the information security training. We do appreciate everything being provided by Temkeen to Bahraini citizens, but I believe we are always late compared to attackers. They are ahead of us. They have more time, they have more resources, especially attacking groups like coming from terrorism organizations, APT groups. They have more resources compared to us working in information security field. We need to think of automation. 60% almost of automation, the percentage of automation requirement is the number and increasing by 60%. Automation tools for social engineering, for IT infrastructure, for information security. We need to have security orchestration services. We need to have threat detection and response. We can no longer monitor information security incidents manually. We can no longer take an action like you can say firefighting mode. We need to be proactive. We need to have automated tools that can detect incidents and fix them on the spot, block attackers on the spot, detection of data leakage. We need automation tools. And I believe NGN do have services related to automation, but we need to have more in the region here. In Bahrain, especially in Bahrain. Bahrain is known for great financial services, and we are almost, I believe we are the center of fintech in the region, the hub of fintech. The recent initiatives announced by Bahrain, by CBB, by the government, they are all going toward fintech transformation, digital transformation. We need more automation. We can no longer work with manual tools. We need automated tools. Now, looking at the automation and the financial sector and the digital initiatives and transformation happening around us, we still have many companies who are considered financial or partially dealing with financial transactions. They are not complying with data payment security standards like PCI DSS. This is the most common one. It's used in Bahrain and it's forced by CBB. So we have many companies not complying with PCI DSS, payment card and data security standard. So this is a problem. We need to have more talent. We need to have more intelligence around this. We need to have more awareness. We need to increase the training for this certification or standard. People assign consultants to do it for them, but they are not aware how to keep the compliance level going on year after year. With the number of changes happening in the field, in IT and the business, you need to reconsider. You need to do another gap assessment every year to make sure you are complying with the standard. So this is also a challenge for us in information security. Keeping everything said in mind, the investment is increasing almost by 100% compared to 3 years back. I will not go 10 years back. I will say 3 years back. The amount we are putting, the money we are putting in the information security investments increased almost 100%. Year-on-year growth attained by the number of cloud assessment projects executed by companies is also increasing. 80% of cybersecurity attacks is happening on the financial sector. So on the other hand, you need to have more investment in the information security tools and equipments. Now, this is one of the challenging points. 84% of companies at some time, they got hacked or compromised. The problem is many of these companies, they are not aware that they are hacked or they are not aware they are compromised. So to look at the dependencies here, now in 2020 and 2021, we have more than 80% increased level in the utilizing remote access tools, cloud. We are utilizing the cloud services by 80%. We are utilizing remote access tools more than 80%. Now, I don't think people will go back to normal anytime soon in the future. Companies already tried this type of working environment, and I believe they like it. They will continue using this. It is a cost-saving approach and more convenient approach also for people, for employees. But with that, we need to have more investment. We need to take care of all devices used to access our companies remotely. We need to have proper security management for all of these devices, laptops, computers, patching, remote patching, antivirus, multi-factor authentication for VPN connections. So we said over 80% are concerned that they are already hacked, but they don't know it. This means we need to have more investment, more awareness level also for staff. They need to be aware how to detect cybersecurity incidents. It will start like with the smallest, the smallest chain, part of the chain, or the weakest part in the chain is the staff itself, the employees, the users, end users. We need to increase the level of awareness for them. we can't only rely on the information security or IT departments. We need to teach and educate users on how to detect information security incidents, threats like phishing, social engineering, smishing, and vishing. We can see and we predict that there will be a 15% growth and demand in the cloud services by 2025. And there are statistics saying it could be more than 50%. The investment being put into information security and digital transformation projects and the information security forensic projects is more than 10 billion worldwide. So by 2023, there are an estimation, and as per Gartner, the source is Gartner, 30% of information security officers and chief information security officers will need to directly measure their ability to work to provide to the business what exactly they are achieving for their businesses. It's not about having the latest certification. It's about enabling business to perform digital transformation, to perform the recent digital initiatives, and provide an easier solution for customers, like digital eKYC, digital onboarding for financial services. This will require a lot of investment and a lot of focus from information security experts to enable these companies. This is like some ideas that I had in mind I wanted to discuss and I wanted to present to you guys. If you have any question for me, you are welcome. I hope this was informative and beneficial to you. Thank you very much.
So I hope that, again, as I start, these sessions will help us to grow together and bring more, I would say, awareness and like the current status of the cybersecurity situation in the region and in Bahrain especially. Thank you very much. So, yeah, we start our Q&A session. So please, you can text the messages in the text box. So, and the moderators, they will address them to the presenters, I assume. So, yeah, if you have any questions, please text it in the message box. Yeah, thank you, Gert, for your question. Definitely, all the materials will be available, and we will share this information with the attendees. If you, Hassan, don't mind to share this your presentation as well.
Sure, no worries. I will do that. Eli, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Something came into my mind, and I think the answer will help the attendees get some idea. Now, keeping in mind all the points that I have mentioned, do you have an NGN, a strategic initiative or a plan to fulfill or provide these services in Bahrain in the coming 1 or 2 or 3 years? What's your approach? What you are planning to do?
Yeah, this is the great point and very important topic, I would say. I will not create here some, let's say, portfolio description of NGN services. I just want to say that this initiative should be supported through the regulator point of view. So I strongly believe that all the security practitioners and the companies who are doing the cybersecurity in Bahrain and in the region, also with the organizations, with the banks, with the CISOs, and we need to work very closely together and definitely with the Central Bank of Bahrain to bring these initiatives to discuss them and make the regulatory part, the law, I would say baseline in Bahrain, very clear, and we need to make sure that the regulatory part is clear for all of the, let's say, players, I would say, in the market, from the information security side or from the organization point of view. So yeah, this is my idea.
Thank you, Ilya. Now I can see a question coming from my cousin Hussein Al-Arabi.
Okay.
The answer is simple. Now, for financial sector, it is more organized because these companies, they do have legal department. So for PDPL, it is easier for companies with legal department to assign a PDPL champion or a data privacy or data protection officer, or we call it a champion. And from the other departments like IT and information security, by default, if you are compliant with PCI DSS, if you are compliant with information security standard like ISO 27001, by default, you need to protect customer data, the PII, personal identified information. So this is by default should be covered. Now, what is the difference from PDPL perspective? Is the consent form, for example. When you are collecting data from customers, you need to take their consent. You need to ask them for approval before you can store this data, before you can share this data with other business, or maybe if you are in a group of companies, you have like subsidies or you have like sister companies. In this case, you need to take approval from customers before sharing their data. And customers should have the right to ask for their data to be deleted or withdrawn. Like they can ask for a copy of all their data. Similarly, if you can see, this is happening worldwide in all major websites. From GDPR perspective, PDPL is similar, but for Bahrain only. Now, the challenge is still there is no clear picture from the government who is responsible for enforcing this law. So, for example, now we go as a customer, you go to the barber shop or you go to the supermarket. Many businesses around you can ask you for your personal data, like your ID number, CPR. Now, I believe we should have the right to say no, why you need this information. This is what PDPL about. And these companies also should give you a proper justification why they need the information. So this is in general. I hope this answers your question, Hussein, and the others, I believe they're asking about the same PDPL as well. So PDPL is still, we can say it's still in the beginning, implementing PDPL, enforcing the law. It's still in the beginning, early phases or early stages. In major organization, large organization like banks, it is known they have taken all the necessary steps to create policies, procedures, documentation, systems to make sure they are in line and compliant with the law. But small businesses, people awareness is still challenging. I believe we need to increase the awareness level also amongst the people in Bahrain regarding this law and about their rights.
Agree with you, Hassan. I would just would like to add the small thing here. You mentioned that the big enterprises, they are aware, but the small businesses are, let's say, not clearly follows the regulations, because again, it's not so, let's say, clear for now. So simple question, all the let's say coffee shops and restaurants now, they are require you to fill the form where you need to put your name, CPR, phone number, which is actually your personal data. And does anyone ask them how you are store this information? So what you are doing with all these forms, with all your information about like a CPR, as I said, phone number and the name. So it is the long journey, and I think that definitely the PDPL should be, let's say, revised in the, to improve some statements there to make it clear for all the players in the market. Also, the awareness for the people and especially small businesses should be increased as well.
Thank you, Elia. There's another question here about PDPL. Who is going to regulate it? Now, as per my knowledge, the government, I believe, assigned a new organization or a new authority to do that. I don't have clear ideas about it, how they will regulate it. Still, as I said, it's in the early stages, and I believe what happened is this law, it went active in 2019 in August, and then COVID came. So that was the major challenge for them to enforce this law. Yeah, imagine implementing or saying PDPL is active, and then COVID came, and now people are requested to provide their information. So if you look at it from this like corner, from this point of view, it is challenging and it is difficult for the government also to force it. I do understand the situation.
Yeah, just a short comment here from the, let's say, practice in the Europe or other countries, that such regulations like a PDPL or any other data protection laws, it's regulated by Ministry of Information or Ministry of Digitalization, something like that. So it is not related to the, for example, any specific area of the regulatory, like a central bank as we have here. It's more like it's have more wider coverage, and it's regulated from the, I would say, higher government institutes.
That's really good. Hopefully, we'll see some progress soon. So we need to be ready, and this is what I can elaborate on. This is like the suggestion to everyone coming from the field. If you are in a company and you know that you will be required to fulfill the requirements of PDPL, be ready now. Don't wait, because they will hit you suddenly without knowing, and then you will face some penalties maybe. So be ready.
Sure, definitely. We all need to be ready. Okay, so
thank you, Eli. Thank you very much.
Hassan. Thank you very
Hassan,
much for
I thank
your
you very
valuable
much.
points.
Eli, I thank you. Hassan, I think I dropped down or wrote a couple of very important points you mentioned. You mentioned something about talent scarcity, which we totally agree with you. You mentioned about knowledge and awareness, and that's an area very obvious, and the managed services area, and the continuous increased stats. What we find, Hassan, is from customers in Bahrain and outside, they are saying that building internal resources or expertise also is it's expensive, and you build that talent, you build the training, you build the capability, and the resource leaves us and they move on. I have to bring somebody else, I have to retrain and do it. That's a challenge, and that's why what we have decided is that we want to become closer, and we want to have all the pool of talents with us and grow and offer such services. But we want to be, our commitment in Bahrain, Hassan, is to you and to everybody else, is that we want to share knowledge, continuously share knowledge through this event. So the main event or the objective of the Bahrain NGN Majlis is to create this shared awareness where we hear concerns from your side, we bring experts, and here we have our partners, our close partners, Group IB, where they share their experience of our local market or what they see and what they see abroad. They share the knowledge here. So our commitment is to continuously share that knowledge, Hassan, bring pool of talents and expertise, offer automation and services that can help and assist, because the threats are, as you mentioned, are increasing, and we are trying our best to assist in that area, and we have pool of expertise to help in that area. So I just wanted to thank you. I think your comments were very valuable. I kept a note of them here with me, and I promise you that we will continuously have this event. This is an event the team has promised that this will be a continuous event where we share knowledge, where we hear feedbacks, where we bring, I would say, build a community here in Bahrain, equip them or bring latest information with them. And I thank all who have participated, and I thank obviously our partners, Group IB. I thank especially Tim Bobak for his valuable information. I thank my team. I thank Ilya and all of the team who are behind all of this event. I wish all the success to everybody. We promise you we will continuously enhance this event, and I just want to thank all of you for participating. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yaqub Muwafaqin بالتوفيق. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you.
And last suggestion, send a calendar, like not a calendar, send a plan to everyone, like make it visible how often you will do this session to everyone else, to provide the session to the region and to the expertise in the region. The more you provide it, the more you will hear ideas, the more concerns you know about, and this will help you enhance your services and will most probably generate more leads for you also in NGN.
Thank you,
Totally
sir.
agree
And
with
it's
you.
my pleasure to be with you and attend any session you want me to attend. It's my pleasure to help you anytime you need.
Allah يخليك. This is a great honor for us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Really
Akhil.
appreciate
Thank you, Ilya. Thank you,
Shukran.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Hassan.
Tim Bubak.
Thank you, guys.
All the best. مع
Assalamu
السلامة. Thank
alaikum.
you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.